Imagine this: a perfect life in a Malibu mansion, a loving tech billionaire husband, and a baby girl on the way. But one phone call shatters everything, revealing a web of betrayal, affairs, and a chilling plan to lock his pregnant wife in a soundproof vault, slowly suffocating her to steal their child. What if she fights back using her forgotten engineering skills? What if her desperate escape video goes viral, exposing a conspiracy of powerful men destroying women's lives? This isn't just a story, it's a heart-pounding thriller of survival, justice, and empowerment that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. Stick around to hear how one woman's courage sparked a movement that brought down an empire. If this hooked you like it did me, hit that like button to show your support. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Did you see the twist coming? Share it with a friend who needs this inspiration. And subscribe for more epic stories like this. Let's dive in. Claire Whitman sat in her white Mercedes outside Dr. Morrison's office, her 8-month pregnant belly pressing against the steering wheel as she fumbled for her phone. The ultrasound appointment had gone perfectly. Baby girl was healthy, growing strong, and would arrive in just 4 weeks. Claire couldn't wait to share the news with Marcus, her tech billionaire husband who had built an empire while she had built their perfect home life. The September California sun streamed through her windshield as she dialed Marcus's private number. He was supposed to be in Seattle for 3 days, closing a major acquisition deal that would add another $50 million to their already vast fortune. Claire had married Marcus Whitman 5 years ago when she was 33, giving up her promising career as an electrical engineer to become the perfect corporate wife. At 38, she had finally convinced him they were ready for children. The phone rang once, twice, then a breathless female voice answered. "Hello." The voice was young, intimate, clearly not expecting a business call. Claire's heart stopped. "I'm sorry. I think I have the wrong number. I was trying to reach Marcus Whitman." There was a pause, then muffled voices in the background. Claire heard Marcus's distinctive laugh, the one he used to reserve just for her. "Rachel, who is it?" His voice was tender, affectionate in a way that made Claire's blood turn to ice. Rachel, his 26-year-old assistant who had started working for him 8 months ago. 8 months, exactly as long as Claire had been pregnant. "It's nothing, just a wrong number," Rachel whispered back, but Claire heard every word. The line went dead. Claire sat in her car, pregnant and betrayed, as the perfect life she had carefully constructed began crumbling around her. Her hands shook as she started the engine, the baby kicking frantically as if sensing her mother's distress. The drive from Beverly Hills to their Malibu mansion passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. Their house sat on 3 acres overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a testament to Marcus's success and Claire's eye for design. She had spent 2 years renovating it, turning it into the perfect family home. Now it felt like a beautiful prison. Claire parked in their circular driveway and walked through the front door, her heels clicking on the imported Italian marble. The house was eerily quiet, just the hum of their smart home system that Marcus had programmed to anticipate their every need. She headed straight to his home office, a room she rarely entered since it was his private domain. The door was unlocked, unusual for Marcus, who was obsessively private about his business affairs. His laptop sat open on his mahogany desk, the screen still glowing. Claire approached it with trembling hands, knowing she was about to discover something that would change everything. The email chain was right there on the screen. No password protection, no hiding. Months of intimate messages between Marcus and Rachel. Photos of romantic dinners. Weekend getaways to Napa Valley while Claire thought he was in business meetings. Pictures of Rachel wearing lingerie Claire recognized from her own drawer. The most recent message was from yesterday. "Can't wait until the baby comes and we can finally start our real life together. Claire was always just a placeholder until I could find someone worthy of the Whitman name. 4 more weeks and I'll have secured the heir. Then we can move forward with our plans." Claire's legs gave out and she collapsed into Marcus's leather chair, her pregnant belly making it impossible to get comfortable. She scrolled through more messages, each one revealing the depth of his deception. He had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe longer. The pregnancy wasn't the joyful surprise she thought it was. It was part of his calculated plan to secure his legacy before discarding her. She picked up the framed photo from his desk, the one of their wedding day in Tuscany. They looked so happy, so in love. Claire remembered how Marcus had proposed after a whirlwind 6-month courtship, sweeping her off her feet with private jets and 5-star restaurants. She had felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Now she realized she had been nothing more than a carefully selected broodmare. Claire walked to the nursery she had spent months perfecting. The walls were painted in soft yellow with hand-painted butterflies that had cost $3,000. The custom Italian crib sat surrounded by boxes of baby clothes she had carefully chosen. She sank onto the window seat, rain beginning to patter against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the ocean. This was supposed to be her daughter's room, where she would read bedtime stories and sing lullabies. Instead, it would probably become Rachel's domain within a month. Claire imagined the younger woman redecorating, erasing every trace of her presence from the house she had lovingly restored. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the stress hormones flooding Claire's system. She placed both hands on her belly, trying to calm herself for her daughter's sake. "I'm sorry, baby girl," she whispered. "Mommy just learned that Daddy isn't the man we thought he was." Claire reached for her worn copy of Eat, Pray, Love from the nursery bookshelf, the book that had inspired her to take chances and follow her heart. That heart had led her straight into Marcus's web of lies. In a moment of fury, she threw the book at the opposite wall, watching it fall open to a passage about learning to trust yourself when the world falls apart. The irony wasn't lost on her. The sound of the garage door opening made Claire freeze. Marcus wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow night. She heard his voice echoing from the foyer, but he wasn't alone. Rachel's distinctive laugh filled the air, sharp and triumphant. Claire's mind raced. She was 8 months pregnant, financially dependent on a man who had been planning to abandon her, and now trapped in her own home with her husband and his pregnant mistress. Because that was the other detail from the emails that had nearly stopped her heart. Rachel was pregnant too, about 4 months along. Marcus was replacing her with a newer model in every possible way. Heavy footsteps approached the nursery. Claire stood up as best she could, trying to compose herself even though her world was ending. "Cara." "Claire." Marcus's voice carried that edge of impatience she had learned to fear over the years. "What are you doing home? I thought you had shopping planned with Sarah today." He appeared in the doorway, looking as devastatingly handsome as ever in his custom Italian suit. At 45, Marcus had the kind of distinguished good looks that only improved with age and wealth. Behind him lurked Rachel, her red hair perfect despite the cross-country flight, her own small bump barely visible under her designer dress. "The ultrasound appointment finished early," Claire said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Baby is healthy and growing right on schedule." Marcus's expression didn't change, but she caught the quick glance he exchanged with Rachel. "That's wonderful news," he said in the tone he used for business associates. "We need to talk. Claire, there are some things we need to discuss about the future." Rachel stepped forward, her young face glowing with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. "Hi, Claire," she said with false sweetness. "I hope you don't mind that I came with Marcus. We have some exciting news to share." Claire looked between them, her husband and his pregnant mistress standing in the nursery she had created for their daughter, and felt something inside her break. But alongside the heartbreak came something else, a cold, sharp anger she had never felt before. "Actually," Claire said, "I think I already know what you want to tell me. The question is whether you're brave enough to say it to my face." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He had always underestimated her intelligence, treating her like a beautiful decoration rather than the woman who had earned a full scholarship to MIT. "We should have this conversation in private," he said. "Rachel, why don't you wait in the guest house while Claire and I talk?" "No," Claire said firmly. "She's part of this now. We should all hear it together." The security cameras in the corner of the room captured everything as Marcus stepped closer, his presence suddenly feeling threatening rather than protective. "Fine," he said coldly. We need to talk. All three of us. But not here, where anyone could overhear. Come to my office. We need absolute privacy for this discussion. Claire's maternal instincts screamed danger, but she was trapped. This was her house, her life, her pregnancy. She deserved to hear exactly how they planned to destroy it all. She followed Marcus down the hallway toward his private office, Rachel trailing behind them with barely concealed excitement. The baby kicked frantically, as if sensing they were walking into a trap. Claire had no idea how right her instincts were. Marcus led them past his regular office to a door Claire had noticed, but never questioned. Behind it lay a room she had never seen before, a vault originally designed for storing business documents and valuable items. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and a large safe, but what struck Claire immediately was how soundproof it felt once the heavy door closed behind them. Please sit, Marcus said, gesturing to the single chair in front of his desk. The gesture felt more like a command than an invitation. Claire lowered herself carefully into the chair, her pregnant belly making every movement awkward. Rachel stood behind Marcus like a loyal soldier, her hand possessively on his shoulder. I suppose you figured out some of what's happening, Marcus began, his voice taking on the clinical tone he used in board meetings. I was hoping to handle this more delicately, but since you're here, we might as well address everything directly. Claire's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm. I'm listening. Marcus opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Rachel and I have been together for 8 months. She's pregnant with my child, due in February. We've been waiting for the right time to transition our relationship into something public and permanent. The words hit Claire like physical blows. Transition. You've been an excellent wife, Claire, Marcus continued as if discussing a business merger. You've provided stability while I built the company, and you're about to give me the air I need to secure my legacy. But Rachel represents the future of the Whitman name. She's young, brilliant, ambitious. She understands the tech world in ways you never could. Rachel stepped forward, her youth and confidence radiating like a weapon. Claire, I hope you can understand this isn't personal. Marcus and I connect on levels that... She paused, looking at Claire's pregnant form with barely disguised pity. That just weren't possible with someone from your generation. Claire's engineering mind, trained to solve complex problems under pressure, began analyzing the situation. Something was wrong beyond the obvious betrayal. Why bring her to this private vault? Why not simply ask for a divorce in their regular living room? What exactly are you proposing? Claire asked carefully. Marcus smiled, but it was the expression of a predator rather than the man she had married. I'm not proposing anything. Claire, I'm informing you of what's going to happen. You see, I've spent considerable time and money ensuring this transition goes smoothly. He opened the folder on his desk, revealing a stack of legal documents. This is a pre-signed divorce decree, very generous terms. Actually, you'll receive $2 million, enough to start over somewhere far from California. The house, the cars, the art collection, all of that stays with the Whitman estate. Naturally, Claire's blood turned to ice. Pre-signed by whom? By your hand, Rachel said with barely contained glee. Marcus has an excellent forger on retainer. Your signature has been practiced quite extensively. The room seemed to spin around Claire. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated theft of her entire life. And our daughter, Marcus's expression hardened. She'll be raised as a Whitman should be, with every advantage money can provide. Rachel has agreed to be her stepmother. You, unfortunately, have proven yourself unstable and unfit for motherhood. Unstable? Claire's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. The documentation is quite extensive, Marcus said, pulling out another file. Your recent erratic behavior, your obsession with conspiracy theories about my business dealings, your emotional outbursts. Dr. Patterson has been very helpful in establishing a pattern of mental instability. Claire remembered her sessions with Dr. Patterson, the psychiatrist Marcus had insisted she see when she complained about feeling isolated and depressed during her pregnancy. She had trusted him, opened up about her fears and insecurities. Now she realized every word had been twisted into evidence against her. "You can't do this," Claire said, struggling to rise from the chair. "I'm her mother. No court would—" "Actually, they would," Rachel interrupted. "When the wife of a prominent businessman suffers a complete mental breakdown and disappears, leaving behind clear evidence of her instability, custody decisions become quite straightforward." Claire's mind raced, her engineering background kicking in despite her emotional turmoil. She began to understand the true scope of their plan. This wasn't just about replacing her. This was about erasing her completely. "You're planning to kill me?" she said quietly. Marcus's smile widened. "Don't be so dramatic, Claire. You're going to disappear." Unfortunately, pregnant women sometimes suffer from severe depression and make regrettable choices. The Golden Gate Bridge is famous for such tragedies. The vault suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Claire realized why Marcus had brought her here. It was completely soundproof, isolated from the rest of the house. Even if she screamed, no one would hear her. "The beauty of this plan," Rachel added, clearly enjoying Claire's terror, "is that it solves all our problems at once. Marcus gets his heir. I get to raise her as my own. And you get to avoid the humiliation of a very public divorce." Claire tried to stand, but Marcus pushed her back down into the chair. For the first time in their marriage, she saw the real man behind the charming facade, cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. "I won't let you do this," Claire said, her hands instinctively covering her belly. "I'll fight you. I'll expose everything." "With what evidence?" Marcus asked. "Your word against mine? A pregnant woman having delusions against a respected businessman? Even if someone believed you, do you think you have the resources to fight me in court? I employ half the best lawyers in California." Claire's mind flashed to Juliana Margulies in The Good Wife, how Alicia Florrick had found strength when her world collapsed. But Alicia had allies, resources, options. Claire had none of those things. "Please," Claire said, dropping the pretense of strength. "I'll sign whatever you want. I'll leave quietly. Just let me have my daughter." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her like a specimen under a microscope. "It's too late for negotiations. Claire, you know too much about my business operations. And frankly, you're a liability I can't afford." "What business operations?" Claire asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Rachel pulled out a tablet and showed Claire a series of financial documents. "Your husband has been quite creative with his charitable foundation. Amazing how much money can be redirected when you control the accounting." Claire stared at the numbers, her MIT-trained mind quickly calculating the scope of the fraud. Marcus had been stealing millions from cancer research foundations, children's hospitals, educational programs. The charity work she had been so proud to support was nothing but an elaborate money laundering scheme. "This is why you can't simply disappear quietly," Marcus explained. "You're too smart, and you've seen too much. The risk of you talking to the wrong person is unacceptable." Claire felt the baby kick frantically, as if sensing the danger they were in. Her daughter was fighting for survival before she was even born. "I need to use the bathroom," Claire said, trying to buy time to think. Marcus shook his head. "I'm afraid that's not possible. We need to finish our conversation first." Claire looked around the vault, noting the ventilation system, the electronic locks, the security cameras that Marcus could control from his desk. This room was designed to be impregnable from the outside. But what about from within? "You know what the ironic part is," Rachel said, clearly enjoying her moment of triumph. "Claire actually helped us plan this. All those conversations about feeling trapped in your marriage, about wondering if you were good enough to be a mother. Dr. Patterson recorded everything. Your own words will be used to explain your tragic suicide." The cruelty of it took Claire's breath away. They had turned her moments of vulnerability during pregnancy into weapons against her own life. Marcus stood up and walked to a control panel on the wall. I'm sorry it has to end this way. Claire, you really were a good wife for the time I needed you. He pressed a series of buttons, and Claire heard the unmistakable sound of locks engaging. The vault door was now sealed shut. The maintenance system runs automatically, Marcus explained, his voice coming through an intercom now. Oxygen levels will gradually decrease over the next few hours. You'll simply fall asleep and never wake up. Very peaceful. Really? Claire tried to rush to the door, but her pregnant body was too slow, too awkward. She pounded on the heavy metal, screaming for help that would never come. Rachel deserves to move into this house without interference. Marcus's voice continued through the speaker. She deserves to raise our children in a home free from the ghost of my past mistakes. Through the security monitor, Claire could see Marcus and Rachel leaving the vault anteroom. Rachel paused to wave goodbye, her young face glowing with victory. Claire was alone, locked in a soundproof vault, slowly running out of air while carrying her unborn daughter. The perfect life she had built was revealed to be nothing but an elaborate trap, and now it was about to become her tomb. But as the oxygen levels began to drop and the walls seemed to close in, Claire felt something she hadn't expected: a cold, calculating fury that matched Marcus's own. Her MIT engineering degree might be 5 years old, but her mind was still sharp. Her body might be 8 months pregnant, but her will to protect her daughter was stronger than ever. Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the woman he had tried to bury alive. Claire was about to show him exactly how dangerous that mistake could be. Claire's phone showed 2 bars of signal and 37% battery life. In her panic, she had almost called 911 immediately, but something made her pause. Marcus controlled everything: the security system, the local police donations, even the phone company contracts. How could she be sure any call would reach the right people instead? She opened her camera app and pressed record. "My name is Claire Whitman," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's September 15th, about 3:30 p.m. My husband, Marcus Whitman, CEO of Whitman Technologies, has locked me in his private vault. I'm 8 months pregnant, and he plans to kill me to cover up his embezzlement of charity funds." Her hands shook as she turned the camera to show the locked door, the control panels, the filing cabinets that now felt like tombstones in her metal coffin. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't survive, but my daughter might. Please don't let Marcus and Rachel Chen raise her. She deserves better than parents who are murderers and thieves." Claire felt the baby kick frantically, responding to her elevated stress hormones. She placed her free hand on her belly, trying to calm them both. "I'm going to try to get us out of here, baby girl. Mommy's going to fight for you." She ended the recording and immediately uploaded it to her cloud storage, praying the backup would complete before her phone died or the signal was cut. Claire forced herself to think like the engineer she used to be. Every system had vulnerabilities, even ones designed by someone as paranoid as Marcus. She had helped design security systems during her brief stint at a tech startup before meeting Marcus. The key was understanding the logic behind the design. She began systematically examining the vault. The ventilation system caught her attention first. It was too sophisticated for simple document storage. This room had been designed for human occupancy, which meant Marcus had been planning something like this for a long time. The air conditioning unit in the corner had an access panel secured with standard screws. Claire's wedding ring had a decorative band with small raised elements that might work as a makeshift screwdriver if she was desperate enough. But first, she needed to understand the security system. Claire moved to Marcus's filing cabinets, no longer caring about respecting his privacy. The first drawer contained business documents she couldn't understand, but the second held something that made her blood run cold: detailed dossiers on 3 other women. Sarah Hendricks, a former Whitman Technologies executive who had died in a hiking accident 2 years ago. Maria Santos, an accountant who had committed suicide after discovering financial irregularities. Jennifer Walsh, a journalist who had been investigating tech industry charity fraud before dying in a random mugging. All 3 women had been young, intelligent, and dangerously close to exposing Marcus's criminal activities. Claire wasn't his first victim. She was just the latest in a pattern of eliminating threats. The documentation was meticulous, including psychological profiles, personal vulnerabilities, and detailed plans for their elimination. Marcus had kept trophies of his victims, like a serial killer. Claire's engineering mind shifted into crisis mode. The emotional horror would have to wait. Right now, she needed to focus on survival. She moved to the third filing cabinet and found what she was looking for: technical specifications for the vault's security system. Marcus's obsessive need to control everything extended to keeping detailed records of all his systems. The electronic lock had a backup manual override, but it required a specific sequence of button presses while holding down a hidden reset switch. Claire studied the diagrams until she had memorized the pattern. The oxygen system was more complex. It was designed to operate on a timer, gradually reducing airflow over several hours to simulate a peaceful death. But like all electronic systems, it relied on circuit boards and wiring that could be manipulated. Claire looked at her phone, 23% battery remaining. The oxygen was already becoming noticeably thinner. She could feel her heart working harder, and the baby's movements were becoming more agitated. She needed tools. Claire removed her wedding ring, the symbol of a marriage that had been a lie from the beginning, and began working on the access panel. The decorative elements weren't ideal screwdrivers, but with patience and determination, she managed to remove the first screw. As she worked, Claire thought about her grandmother Rose, who had survived the Great Depression by learning to make something from nothing. Rose used to say that women were natural engineers because they spent their lives solving problems with whatever materials they had available. "Grandma Rose would be proud of me right now," Claire whispered to her daughter. "Using jewelry to escape from a vault, that's definitely making something from nothing." The second screw came loose, then the third. Claire's fingers were bleeding from the effort, but she kept working. The fourth screw finally gave way, and the access panel swung open to reveal the circuit board that controlled the ventilation system. Claire had studied electrical engineering at MIT, but that was 15 years ago. She closed her eyes and tried to remember her circuit analysis classes: voltage, current, resistance, Ohm's law, the basic principles that governed how electricity flowed through systems. The baby kicked hard, reminding Claire that she was running out of time for both of them. She traced the wiring with her finger, following the path from the main power supply to the oxygen regulation system. There, a series of resistors that controlled the flow rate. If she could short-circuit the right connection, she might be able to reset the system to normal oxygen levels. Claire took apart her bracelet, an anniversary gift from Marcus that now seemed obscenely ironic. The metal links could serve as jumper wires if she was careful. Working with pregnant hands and diminishing oxygen was like performing surgery while drowning. But Claire forced herself to focus. She identified the correct resistor and carefully bridged the connection with a piece of jewelry that had once symbolized Marcus's love. The ventilation system hummed, paused, then resumed with a noticeably stronger airflow. Claire had bought herself time, but she was still trapped. Now for the door. Claire moved to the control panel, studying the sequence she had memorized from Marcus's files. The hidden reset switch was behind a false panel she needed to pry open with her fingernails. Her manicure, perfectly maintained for years to please Marcus, was destroyed within minutes, but she managed to expose the switch. Holding down the reset button, Claire entered the override sequence 7419278, the combination of Marcus's birthday and the date they met, because even in his criminal activities, he was predictably narcissistic. Nothing happened. Claire's heart sank. Maybe the system had been updated since the documentation. Maybe Marcus had changed the codes. Maybe she had remembered wrong. She tried again, more slowly this time, making sure each button press registered clearly. 7419278. The lock mechanism clicked, and Claire heard the sweetest sound of her life, the metal bolts retracting from the door frame. She pushed against the heavy door, and it swung open into the anteroom. Fresh air rushed into her lungs as she stumbled out of the vault, her hands protectively covering her belly. Claire was free, but she wasn't safe. Marcus and Rachel were somewhere in the house, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill her directly if their elaborate plan had failed. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, relief flooding through her as the call connected immediately. 911, what's your emergency? This is Claire Whitman. My husband has just tried to murder me. I'm pregnant and I need help immediately. I'm at 1247 Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. Ma'am, can you tell me what happened? Claire started to explain, but then she heard voices in the hallway outside Marcus's office. They were coming back. They're here, she whispered into the phone. Please hurry. Claire looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the office had no other exits. She was trapped between the vault she had just escaped and the door where her would-be killers were approaching. The voices grew closer. Claire could hear Marcus talking to someone, probably Rachel, about timing and alibis. They thought she was dead by now. Claire made a desperate decision. She stepped back into the vault but left the door slightly open, hoping to overhear their conversation and gather evidence of their plans. The oxygen should have done its work by now, Marcus was saying as they entered the office. We'll give it another hour, then discover the tragic scene. Claire's depression finally overwhelmed her, and she chose to end her life in my private safe room to spare us the trauma of finding her body in a public place. What about the baby? Rachel's voice was closer now. Emergency C-section. We'll say Claire managed to call 911 in her final moments, begging us to save her daughter. Very dramatic, very believable. Claire recorded everything on her phone, gathering evidence even as her heart broke for the daughter these monsters planned to steal. The police should arrive any minute for the welfare check, Marcus continued. You know what to say. You're concerned about my pregnant wife's mental state, and we came home to check on her after she sent some disturbing text messages. That's when Claire realized the full scope of their deception. They had set up an elaborate alibi that would paint them as concerned family members rather than murderers. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed she would be dead by now. Claire heard footsteps approaching the vault. It was time to reveal that their perfect plan had a major flaw. She stepped out of the vault, phone in hand, recording everything. Surprise, she said quietly. Marcus and Rachel spun around, their faces showing shock, fear, and rage in rapid succession. That's impossible, Rachel breathed. The system was set correctly. You should be dead. Sorry to disappoint you, Claire said, backing toward the office door. But it turns out that MIT engineering degree isn't completely useless after all. Marcus's shock quickly turned to cold calculation. Claire, you're clearly having a breakdown. You broke into my private vault and nearly suffocated yourself. Thank God we arrived in time to save you. Is that the story you're going with? Claire asked, still recording. Because I have some interesting reading material from your filing cabinets. Did you know your husband keeps detailed records of all the women he's killed? Rachel, you might want to ask yourself whether you're his partner or his next victim. Rachel's confident expression wavered slightly, but Marcus stepped forward with the predatory smile Claire now recognized as his true face. Give me the phone. Claire, you're confused and frightened, but we can help you. We can get you the medical attention you clearly need. Claire heard sirens in the distance. Either her 911 call had worked, or Marcus's planned welfare check was arriving early. The police are coming, she said. This is your last chance to explain why your pregnant wife was locked in your private vault with decreasing oxygen levels. Marcus lunged for her phone, but Claire's adrenaline-fueled reflexes were faster than his arrogance had calculated. She dodged toward the door, clutching the evidence that could save her life. But as she reached the hallway, she heard Marcus speaking into his own phone. This is Marcus Whitman. I need to report a break-in. My pregnant wife appears to have suffered a psychotic break and destroyed property in my office. She's armed and dangerous to herself and others. Claire realized with growing horror that the police sirens she heard might not be coming to rescue her after all. Marcus was rewriting the narrative even as it happened, turning her escape into evidence of her mental breakdown. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. We know what he did to the others. Get to the back entrance. We're here to help. Claire had no idea who had sent the message, but with Marcus and Rachel behind her and police potentially arriving to arrest her instead of help her, mysterious assistance was better than no assistance at all. She moved toward the back of the house, her pregnant body making speed impossible, but determination driving her forward. Behind her, she could hear Marcus on the phone with 911 painting himself as the victim of his unstable wife's violent breakdown. The same charm and manipulation that had convinced her to marry him was now being used to destroy her. But Claire was no longer the naive woman who had given up her career for love. She was a mother fighting for her daughter's life, and she would use every ounce of her intelligence and determination to ensure they both survived. The real battle was just beginning. The emergency room at Cedars-Sinai was a blur of bright lights and concerned medical staff as Claire was wheeled in on a gurney. The stress of her escape had triggered contractions, and although they had stopped during the ambulance ride, the baby's heart rate was elevated and erratic. "Mrs. Whitman, I'm Dr. Jennifer Park," the attending physician said, her voice professionally calm. "We need to monitor both you and the baby for the next several hours. The paramedics mentioned you were experiencing some kind of domestic situation." Claire looked around the room, noting the police officer standing by the door and Marcus hovering nearby with an expression of perfect concern. To everyone watching, he looked like a devoted husband worried about his pregnant wife's condition. "My husband tried to kill me," Claire said directly to Dr. Park. "He locked me in a vault and reduced the oxygen levels. I only escaped because I was able to short-circuit the ventilation system." Dr. Park's expression grew carefully neutral, the look healthcare workers used when dealing with patients who might be experiencing psychiatric issues. "Mrs. Whitman, you've been under significant stress," Marcus said in his most gentle tone. "You broke into my private office and locked yourself in the document safe. I found you there having what appeared to be a panic attack." The police officer, Detective Rodriguez, stepped forward with a notepad. "Mr. Whitman called 911 reporting that his wife was having a mental health crisis. The responding officers found evidence of forced entry into a private office and damaged security equipment." Claire felt the world spinning around her. "Forced entry, I lived there, and I didn't damage anything. I disabled a system that was designed to kill me." "Ma'am," Detective Rodriguez said carefully, "your husband has provided us with documentation from your psychiatrist indicating ongoing mental health concerns related to your pregnancy. Dr. Patterson's notes suggest you've been experiencing paranoid delusions and episodes of aggression." The betrayal hit Claire like a physical blow. Dr. Patterson, the therapist Marcus had insisted she see, had been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. Every vulnerable moment she had shared, every fear about motherhood, every insecurity about her changing body, it had all been weaponized against her. "Check my phone," Claire said desperately. "I recorded everything. Marcus and Rachel confessed to planning my murder. Rachel is pregnant with his child, and they were going to raise my daughter after making my death look like suicide." Detective Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we'll need to examine your phone as evidence, but you should know that Mr. Whitman has already explained about Ms. Chen. She's his executive assistant, and she is pregnant, but he's assured us that rumors of an affair are part of your recent paranoid fixations." Claire watched in growing horror as Marcus's version of events was accepted without question. His wealth, his reputation in the community, his charitable foundation work, it all provided credibility that her emotional testimony couldn't match. "The vault," Claire insisted. "Check the vault. There are files in there documenting other murders. Women who discovered Marcus's embezzlement and died under suspicious circumstances." "Mrs. Whitman," Dr. Park interrupted gently, "your blood pressure is extremely elevated, and the baby is showing signs of distress. We need to focus on stabilizing your condition before we address other concerns. Those other concerns include my husband planning to murder me and steal my child," Claire said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive to observers, but felt like a threat to Claire. "Darling, you're scaring yourself with these fantasies," he said. Dr. Patterson warned us this might happen. The hormonal changes of late pregnancy can sometimes trigger psychotic episodes, especially in women with underlying anxiety disorders. The medical team exchanged meaningful glances. Claire realized that Marcus had been laying groundwork for this moment for months, possibly years. Every therapy session, every medical appointment, every concerned conversation with friends about her mood swings had been building to this narrative. A nurse approached with a sedative. "This will help you relax. Mrs. Whitman, you need to think about your baby's health." "No," Claire said firmly. "I don't consent to any medication. I need to stay alert." "Ma'am," Detective Rodriguez said, "given the circumstances and the concerns raised by your family, we may need to place you under a psychiatric hold for evaluation." Claire felt the walls closing in around her again, just like in the vault. But this time, the prison was made of disbelief, manipulation, and a system that favored wealth and reputation over truth. Her phone, her only evidence, was confiscated as potential evidence that would need to be examined by forensic specialists. The recordings she had made in the vault, the video of her escape, the photos of Marcus's victim files, all of it was now in the hands of people who had already decided she was delusional. "I want to call my friend Sarah," Claire said. "She's a family therapist. She'll vouch for my mental state." Marcus's expression flickered for just a moment. "Of course. Darling, Sarah should know what's happening." 30 minutes later, Sarah Chen arrived at the hospital looking concerned and confused. Claire felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone who knew her well enough to recognize the truth. But when Sarah sat down beside her bed, her expression was guarded rather than supportive. "Claire, honey, Marcus called me a few hours ago. He was worried about some concerning behavior you've been displaying." Claire's heart sank. "Sarah, he tried to kill me. Everything I told you about feeling isolated, about thinking something was wrong in my marriage. I was right." Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus, and Claire saw pity in her friend's eyes rather than belief. "Marcus showed me some text messages you sent him this week," Sarah said gently. "Very paranoid, very aggressive. You accused him of stealing from charities, of planning to leave you. These are classic signs of perinatal psychosis." "Claire, he showed you messages, Sarah. He could have fabricated those. You know me. When have I ever been paranoid or aggressive?" "That's exactly the point," Sarah said sadly. "This isn't like you at all, which is why we're so concerned. Perinatal psychosis can completely change a woman's personality and perception of reality." Claire realized that Marcus had been manipulating her support system long before today. How many of her friends had received concerned calls about her deteriorating mental state? How many had been shown fabricated evidence of her instability? "Sarah, please," Claire begged. "Look at my phone when the police return it. There's a recording of Marcus and Rachel planning my murder. There are files proving he's killed other women. I'm not crazy. I'm the victim of a very elaborate conspiracy." But even as she spoke, Claire could see the doubt in Sarah's eyes. The woman who had been her closest friend for 3 years was choosing to believe Marcus's narrative over her desperate pleas for help. A social worker appeared in the doorway, a tired-looking woman in her 50s carrying a thick folder. "Mrs. Whitman, I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. I need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your fitness for motherhood." The final blow. Marcus had been thorough in his destruction of her credibility. Not only was she being painted as mentally unstable, but her right to raise her own daughter was being questioned. "Mr. Whitman has provided extensive documentation of his wife's recent deterioration." "Ms. Morrison continued, "Given the circumstances of today's incident and the medical team's concerns about her current mental state, we need to evaluate whether appropriate safety measures are in place for when the baby arrives." Claire looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Medical professionals, law enforcement, social services, her own best friend. All of them had decided she was a danger to herself and her unborn child. Meanwhile, Marcus stood in the corner, looking like the perfect concerned husband. Rachel discreetly absent from this public display of his victimhood. Through the window, Claire could see the parking lot where TV news vans were gathering. Word was spreading about the pregnant wife of tech billionaire Marcus Whitman having a mental breakdown. By tomorrow, her name would be synonymous with unstable, wealthy women who couldn't handle their privileged lives. As a nurse approached with paperwork for involuntary psychiatric commitment, Claire felt a different kind of despair than she had experienced in the vault. In the vault, she had been fighting for her physical survival. Now she was fighting for something harder to define, but equally crucial: her identity, her credibility, her right to be believed. But there was one person in that room who hadn't spoken yet. Nurse Maria Santos, a middle-aged Latina woman who had been quietly monitoring Claire's vital signs, stepped forward. "Doctor," Nurse Santos said quietly, "I'd like to note for the record that Mrs. Whitman's vital signs have been completely stable since she arrived, except when discussing her husband. Her heart rate and blood pressure spike significantly whenever he approaches or speaks." It was a small observation, but it was the first piece of objective evidence that supported Claire's version of events rather than Marcus's. Dr. Park looked thoughtful. "That is an interesting physiological response. Mrs. Whitman, can you explain why your body reacts that way to your husband's presence?" "Because he terrifies me," Claire said simply. "Because 3 hours ago, he locked me in a vault and tried to murder me. Because my body recognizes a threat even when everyone else in this room has been convinced I'm delusional." Marcus stepped forward, but Nurse Santos subtly positioned herself between him and Claire's bed. "Perhaps Mr. Whitman should wait in another room while we complete our medical evaluation," she suggested, "to minimize the patient's stress levels." It was a tiny victory, but it gave Claire hope. Not everyone was willing to automatically accept Marcus's version of reality. As Marcus reluctantly left the room, Claire caught a glimpse of his true expression when he thought no one was watching: cold, calculating, and furious that his perfect plan was encountering unexpected resistance. The battle for Claire's credibility was far from over, but she had found her first ally in an unlikely place. Nurse Maria Santos had seen something others missed, and Claire intended to build on that foundation of belief, because somewhere in the hospital's bureaucracy, her confiscated phone contained evidence that could expose Marcus's crimes. She just needed to survive long enough for someone to listen to the truth. The baby kicked strongly, reminding Claire that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. Her daughter deserved to know her real mother, not the sanitized version of events Marcus would create after destroying Claire's reputation. Claire settled in for a long fight, knowing that the most dangerous part wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 days later, Claire sat in the Serenity House women's shelter in downtown Los Angeles, staring at the few possessions she had managed to grab during her brief return home under police supervision. Her Hermes handbag looked absurdly out of place next to the worn blankets and secondhand clothes provided by the shelter. Marcus had moved quickly. Within 24 hours of her psychiatric episode, he had emptied their joint bank accounts, canceled her credit cards, and filed for emergency custody of their unborn child. The restraining order prevented her from returning to their Malibu home or contacting him directly. Her phone had been returned by police with all evidence mysteriously corrupted due to technical difficulties with their digital forensics equipment. The recording of Marcus's confession, the photos of his victim files, the documentation of his charity fraud, all of it was gone, dismissed as likely fabricated during her alleged mental breakdown. "First time in a shelter?" asked Carmen Rodriguez, the director, settling into the plastic chair across from Claire in the intake room. Claire nodded, unable to trust her voice. At 38, 8.5 months pregnant, she was homeless and penniless, while her billionaire husband painted himself as the victim of her mental illness. "Tell me what brought you here," Carmen said gently. "I've seen the news reports, but I'd like to hear your version." For the first time since the hospital, someone was asking for Claire's perspective, rather than accepting Marcus's narrative without question. The kindness in Carmen's voice nearly broke her. "My husband tried to murder me," Claire said quietly. He locked me in a vault, reduced the oxygen levels, and planned to make it look like suicide. When I escaped, he convinced everyone I was having a psychotic break. Carmen's expression didn't change, didn't show the skepticism Claire had grown accustomed to seeing. "How did you escape?" Carmen asked. "I used my electrical engineering training to disable the security system and override the ventilation controls. Then I short-circuited the electronic lock using pieces of my jewelry." "MIT," Carmen asked, surprising Claire. "How did you—" "I did my homework before you arrived." Claire Whitman graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in electrical engineering and computer science. Full scholarship recipient. Worked for 3 years at Chen Technologies before marrying Marcus Whitman and leaving the workforce. Claire felt a spark of her old self, the woman who had been respected for her intelligence rather than dismissed as unstable. "You believe me," Claire said, not quite a question. "I believe you because your story makes sense," Carmen replied. "Rich, powerful men don't usually marry brilliant women unless they have a plan for neutralizing that brilliance. Your engineering background explains how you could escape from a sophisticated security system. Your husband's immediate and comprehensive financial retaliation shows premeditation, not the concerned response of a loving spouse." Carmen leaned forward, her voice taking on a harder edge. "But mostly, I believe you because you're the fourth woman to come through here with a remarkably similar story about wealthy husbands and mysterious security system malfunctions." Claire's blood chilled. The fourth? 3 other women in the past 5 years, all married to prominent men, all discovered their husband's criminal activities, all barely escaped with their lives before being painted as mentally unstable gold diggers. Carmen pulled out a thick file folder. Sarah Hendricks, former tech executive, discovered her husband's insider trading scheme, nearly died in a hiking accident, lost everything in divorce court when she was declared psychologically unfit. Maria Santos, CPA who uncovered charity fraud, survived a gas leak at home, lost custody of her children when her husband proved she was delusional. Jennifer Walsh, investigative journalist who was exposing tech industry corruption, survived a random mugging, lost her career when her editors decided she was fabricating stories due to PTSD. Claire recognized 2 of the names from the files she had found in Marcus's vault. Are they alive? Barely. Sarah is living in Portland, working as a barista under an assumed name. Maria cleans offices and hasn't seen her children in 3 years. Jennifer gave up journalism completely and teaches elementary school in Nevada. And you think this is all connected? Carmen opened another file. "I think there's a network of wealthy men who share resources for eliminating inconvenient wives. They use the same lawyers, the same psychiatrists, the same playbook for destroying women's credibility." Claire thought about Dr. Patterson, who had twisted her therapy sessions into evidence of mental illness, about the police who had accepted Marcus's version of events without question, about the social worker who had immediately assumed she was unfit for motherhood. "The lawyer Marcus uses," Claire said slowly. "Does he specialize in these kinds of cases? Robert Blackstone of Blackstone, Myers and Associates. He's represented all 3 of the women I mentioned, working for their husbands. Of course, his success rate in securing custody for wealthy fathers is remarkable, especially when the mothers are conveniently discovered to be mentally unstable." The scope of the conspiracy was overwhelming. This wasn't just Marcus's individual cruelty. It was a systematic approach to silencing women who threatened powerful men's interests. "How do we stop them?" Claire asked. Carmen's expression grew sad. "We don't. These men have infinite resources, top legal teams, and social connections that reach into every institution. The best we can do is help women survive and rebuild their lives somewhere else." Claire felt the baby kick hard, as if protesting the idea of giving up. Her daughter deserved better than a life built on lies and the systematic destruction of her mother's identity. "What if we could prove the conspiracy?" Claire asked. "What if we could connect all these cases and show the pattern? With what evidence your phone was mysteriously corrupted, the other women's evidence was discredited or destroyed. These men are very good at covering their tracks. Claire stood up awkwardly, her pregnant belly making movement difficult. Through the shelter's barred windows, she could see the Los Angeles skyline where Marcus's company headquarters dominated the financial district. Carmen, what did you do before running this shelter? I was a prosecutor specializing in domestic violence cases until my own husband tried to have me killed. Funny how life comes full circle. So you understand evidence. You understand how to build cases. Carmen studied Claire carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Marcus made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was just a decorative wife who gave up her brain when I gave up my career. But I'm still an engineer, and engineers solve problems by finding patterns and testing hypotheses. Claire moved to the window, looking out at the city where 3 other women had been destroyed by the same network that was now targeting her. Marcus keeps detailed records of everything. It's a compulsion, somewhere in his files, in his communications, in his business dealings. There's evidence that connects him to the other cases. We just need to find it. Claire, Carmen said gently, these women tried to fight back. Look where it got them. But they fought alone, Claire replied. What if we fought together? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. Building a case would take months, maybe years. It would be dangerous. These men have already shown they're willing to kill. And even if we succeeded, there's no guarantee the system would believe us over them. Claire thought about her daughter, due to arrive in just 2 weeks. Did she want to raise her child in hiding, always running from Marcus's influence? Or did she want to fight for a world where her daughter could grow up free from the threat of powerful men who destroyed women's lives for convenience? Carmen, I need you to introduce me to Sarah, Maria, and Jennifer. If they're willing to share their stories, maybe we can find the connections Marcus and his network tried to hide. And if we can't, if the evidence doesn't exist or isn't sufficient, Claire placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong movements. Then at least I'll know I tried. At least she'll know her mother didn't give up without a fight. Carmen smiled for the first time since Claire had arrived. You know, I've been documenting these cases for 5 years, waiting for someone with the right combination of intelligence, resources, and sheer stubborn determination to help me connect the dots. Resources, I'm homeless and penniless. But you're not friendless, Carmen said, pulling out another file. Nurse Maria Santos from the hospital has been calling here every day, asking about your condition. Dr. Jennifer Park requested copies of your medical records for a research project she's conducting on trauma responses in pregnant women. Even Detective Rodriguez has been asking questions about similar cases. Claire felt a spark of hope. They believe me. They're starting to. Your story has enough verifiable details that it's making some people uncomfortable with the official narrative. Carmen stood up and moved to a locked filing cabinet. I wasn't entirely honest earlier. We do have some evidence, fragments and pieces that the other women managed to save before their lives were destroyed. Separately. None of it means much. But if we could add your case to the pattern. She pulled out a thick folder filled with documents, photos, and recorded statements. Sarah managed to copy some financial records before her accident. Maria photographed Charity Foundation documents before the gas leak. Jennifer had voice recordings of conversations with sources before the mugging. None of it was enough to save them individually, but together, Claire felt her engineering mind starting to work, seeing patterns and connections that might not be visible to others. Can I see everything? Are you sure once you start down this path, there's no going back? Marcus will escalate his efforts to discredit you, and you'll be putting yourself and your daughter at risk. Claire thought about the vault, about the feeling of slowly suffocating while Marcus's voice explained how he planned to steal her child and erase her existence. She thought about the other women who had suffered similar fates, who were now living in fear and exile. Carmen, my daughter is going to be born into a world where her father is a murderer and her mother is supposedly crazy. If I don't fight this, she'll grow up believing his version of reality. She'll never know that her mother was brave enough to try to save other women from the same fate. Carmen handed her the file. Then let's see what we can build together. As Claire opened the folder and began reading the testimonies of three women who had survived similar attacks, she felt something she hadn't experienced since escaping the vault: hope. Not naive hope for easy solutions, but the determined hope of someone who had found allies and a purpose worth fighting for. The baby kicked approvingly, as if sensing that her mother had finally found a path forward that didn't involve running or hiding. Outside, rain began to fall against the shelter windows. But for the first time in days, Claire didn't see it as an omen of despair. She saw it as a cleansing, washing away the fear and helplessness that had paralyzed her since Marcus's betrayal. Now the real work could begin. The safe house was actually a converted brownstone in Silver Lake, far enough from Marcus's sphere of influence to provide some security, but close enough to downtown for the women to maintain their cover stories. Carmen had arranged everything through a network of domestic violence advocates who understood the unique challenges faced by women fleeing wealthy, powerful abusers. Claire sat in the living room at 8 months pregnant, surrounded by three women who had walked similar paths of destruction and survived. Sarah Hendricks looked older than her 35 years, her former tech executive confidence replaced by the careful watchfulness of someone who had learned to expect betrayal. Maria Santos moved with nervous energy, constantly checking windows and doors despite being assured of their safety. Jennifer Walsh took notes obsessively, her journalist instincts intact even after her career had been destroyed. "Tell me about the lawyers," Claire said, spreading the documents Carmen had provided across the coffee table. "Was Robert Blackstone involved in all your cases? Different firms, same network?" Sarah replied, "My husband used Morrison and Associates, but Blackstone consulted on the psychiatric evaluation strategy. They seemed to share tactics and resources." Maria nodded. "My husband's lawyer was David Chen from Chen and Partners, but Blackstone's firm provided the forensic accounting that proved I had embezzled the money I was actually trying to expose." "Same pattern," Jennifer added. "Different front companies, but they all connect back to a central strategy: discredit the woman's mental state, isolate her from support systems, and control the narrative through sympathetic media contacts." Claire studied the timeline Carmen had created. "The timing is too precise to be coincidental. Your accidents happened within days of each of you discovering evidence that could expose your husband's crimes, which means they have surveillance capabilities we haven't fully understood," Sarah said. "My husband knew I had accessed his private files before I even left his office that day." "Smart home systems," Claire realized. "Marcus had cameras and monitoring throughout our house. He could track my movements, my computer usage, probably even my phone calls. And they share this intelligence," Maria added. "When I started getting suspicious about the charity books, my husband knew details about my investigation that I had never discussed with him." Jennifer leaned forward. "I interviewed a tech worker last year who mentioned something about a private security firm that specializes in reputation management for wealthy clients. Blackstone mentioned the same firm during my custody hearing." Claire felt the pieces clicking together in her engineering mind. It's not just lawyers and psychiatrists. They have a complete infrastructure for destroying women's credibility: surveillance, forensic manipulation, media control, legal strategy. "The question is how to prove it," Carmen said from the doorway. She entered carrying a laptop and several phones. "I've been working with some cybersecurity experts who volunteer for domestic violence organizations. They've been analyzing the digital evidence from all your cases." Carmen set up the laptop and plugged in a secure drive. "What we found is interesting. All four of your husbands use the same cybersecurity firm, Titan Digital Security. They provide comprehensive monitoring and protective services for high-net-worth individuals." The screen showed a complex web diagram connecting various companies, law firms, and service providers. At the center was Titan Digital Security, with lines connecting to Marcus's company, Sarah's ex-husband's investment firm, Maria's ex-husband's real estate empire, and Jennifer's ex-husband's media conglomerate. "Titan doesn't just provide security," Carmen continued. "They offer what they call life transition management for clients facing domestic disruptions. That's corporate speak for helping wealthy men destroy inconvenient wives. Claire studied the diagram. Have you been able to access any of their internal communications? Some, Carmen replied carefully. Let's just say that certain former employees have been willing to share information about practices they found disturbing. A new window opened on the laptop, showing email fragments and internal memos. Claire read through them with growing horror and satisfaction. Horror at the systematic nature of the conspiracy. Satisfaction at finally having concrete evidence. Project Cleanup, Whitman account. One memo read, subject showing increased curiosity about financial records. Recommend acceleration of timeline. Psychological profile suggests isolation and gaslighting will be most effective. Backup termination protocol approved if necessary. They have files on all of us, Sarah breathed, reading over Claire's shoulder. Detailed psychological profiles, vulnerability assessments, contingency plans, including termination protocols, Maria added grimly. They actually planned our deaths from the beginning. Jennifer was already typing on her phone. I still have contacts in investigative journalism. This is the story that could expose everything. Wait, Carmen said sharply. We need to be careful about how we handle this. These men have already shown they're willing to kill to protect their secrets. If we move too quickly or too publicly, we could all end up dead before anyone believes us. Claire felt the baby kick strongly, reminding her that she had more than her own life to consider. What do you recommend? We need insurance, Carmen replied. Multiple copies of all evidence in secure locations. Dead man switches that automatically release everything if anything happens to any of us. Legal strategies that protect us while we build the case. And we need more victims, Sarah added reluctantly. As horrible as it sounds, 4 cases might not be enough to establish a pattern that prosecutors will take seriously. But if there are more women out there, there are, Jennifer said quietly. I've been researching similar cases for 3 years. I found at least a dozen women whose stories match ours, but most of them were too frightened or too destroyed to speak up. Claire stood up carefully, her pregnancy making quick movements impossible. Then we find them. We offer them the same thing Carmen offered us. Proof that they weren't crazy, that they weren't alone, and that there's a chance for justice. That could take months, Maria pointed out. And Marcus isn't going to wait patiently while we build our case. He's already filed for emergency custody of your baby. Which gives us a deadline, Claire replied. I have less than a month before she's born. If we can't present a compelling case by then, Marcus gets custody of my daughter, and I become just another cautionary tale about unstable women who couldn't handle marriage to successful men. Carmen closed the laptop. Then we need to accelerate our timeline. I have contacts at the FBI who specialize in organized crime. If we can present this as a criminal conspiracy rather than just domestic disputes, we might get federal attention. What do we need to make that happen? Claire asked. Financial crimes, Sarah answered immediately. Domestic violence is handled at the state level, but if we can prove these men were coordinating illegal financial activities across state lines, Marcus's charity fraud, Claire realized. It's not just embezzlement. He was moving money between multiple foundations in different states. And if the other husbands were doing similar things, Jennifer was already making notes. A federal RICO investigation would give us access to resources and protection that state prosecutors can't provide. But we need solid financial evidence, Carmen warned. Speculation and suspicious patterns won't be enough. Claire thought about the files she had seen in Marcus's vault, the detailed records of his victim selection and elimination processes. I know where Marcus keeps his real financial records. The problem is that they're in his private vault, the same one he tried to kill me in. Absolutely not, Carmen said firmly. You're not going back there. I don't have to, Claire replied with a smile. Marcus has a backup system for everything. He's too paranoid to trust single points of failure. Somewhere in his cloud storage, in his offshore servers, or in his safety deposit boxes, there are copies of everything. And how do we access those? Sarah asked. Claire pulled out her phone and showed them a contact she had never deleted. Rachel Chen, Marcus's assistant and pregnant mistress. She has access to all his systems because she handles his day-to-day business operations. You want to approach the woman who helped plan your murder? Maria asked incredulously. I want to approach a young woman who is about to discover that her baby's father is a serial killer, Claire corrected. Rachel thinks she's Marcus's partner in crime, but she's actually his next victim. Pregnant mistresses who know too much don't usually have long lifespans in Marcus's world. Carmen considered this. It's dangerous, but it might work. If Rachel realizes she's in danger, she might be willing to provide evidence in exchange for protection. How do we approach her? Jennifer asked. Claire smiled grimly. We make her an offer she can't refuse. Full immunity, witness protection, and custody of her child in exchange for complete cooperation. Can we deliver on those promises? Sarah asked. If we present the FBI with a case this big, involving this many wealthy and powerful men, they'll have the resources to protect their witnesses, Carmen replied. The question is whether Rachel is smart enough to take the deal before Marcus decides she's become a liability. Claire felt the baby kick again, more gently this time, as if approving of the plan. For the first time since her escape from the vault, she felt like she was moving from defense to offense. There's one more thing, she said. We need to consider the possibility that this network extends beyond just our husbands. If Titan Digital Security provides these services to multiple clients, if there are other lawyers and psychiatrists involved, you're talking about potentially dozens of victims, Jennifer realized. And dozens of perpetrators, Claire confirmed. This isn't just about getting justice for us. This is about exposing an entire industry built on destroying women's lives. The room fell silent as the women contemplated the scope of what they were proposing. Taking on one wealthy, powerful man was dangerous enough. Taking on an organized network of them was potentially suicidal. But as Claire looked around the room at three women who had already lost everything and survived, she saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. So, Claire said finally, who's ready to bring down some billionaires? The vote was unanimous. Claire sat in the back seat of Carmen's Honda Civic, uploading the video that would either save her life or destroy what remained of it. The footage was grainy from her phone's low-light camera, but the audio was crystal clear, her own voice narrating her imprisonment in the vault, followed by Marcus and Rachel's recorded confession of their murder plot. Are you sure about this? Carmen asked from the driver's seat. They were parked outside a 24-hour internet cafe in Koreatown, using their public Wi-Fi to mask Claire's digital footprint. It's our only chance, Claire replied, her fingers trembling as she typed the description. The FBI contact won't meet with us without more evidence. Rachel isn't returning our calls, and Marcus's lawyers are accelerating the custody hearing. We need public pressure to force the system to take us seriously. She had spent 3 days editing the footage, combining her vault recording with the documents Carmen had collected from the other victims. The result was a 12-minute video that told a story of systematic abuse, attempted murder, and conspiracy among the wealthy elite. What if they claim it's fake? Sarah asked. She was monitoring social media from her laptop, ready to document responses and spot any immediate threats. Then we'll have the conversation in public instead of behind closed doors, Claire replied. Marcus's power comes from controlling the narrative. If we can get people talking, asking questions, demanding answers, it could backfire, Maria warned. Rich men have excellent crisis management teams. They know how to spin stories, discredit accusers, turn public opinion. Claire looked at her phone screen, thumb hovering over the post button. The hashtag she had chosen was simple but powerful. Pregnant wife betrayed. The title was direct. My billionaire husband locked me in a vault to steal my baby. Jennifer, are your media contacts ready? Claire asked. 12 investigative journalists who specialize in tech industry corruption? Jennifer confirmed. They'll amplify the signal as soon as it goes live. Claire took a deep breath and pressed post. Within minutes, the video was live on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube simultaneously. Carmen's volunteer network of domestic violence advocates began sharing it immediately, But Claire knew the real test would be whether it broke through to mainstream attention. They sat in tense silence, watching the view counts slowly climb. 100 views in the first 10 minutes, 500 after 20 minutes. Then something changed. "It's accelerating," Sarah announced, her voice excited. "The shares are exponentially increasing. People are tagging major news outlets." Claire's phone began buzzing with notifications. Comments poured in from women sharing similar stories of betrayal, isolation, and systemic disbelief. The hashtag pregnant wife betrayed was joined by believe Claire, billionaire abuse, and rich men can't buy justice. "This is incredible," Jennifer breathed, scrolling through responses. Women are sharing photos of their own injuries, their own legal documents, their own stories of wealthy husbands who destroyed their lives. But along with the support came vicious attacks. Bot accounts immediately flooded the comments with accusations that Claire was a gold-digging liar seeking attention and money. Professional crisis management firms activated their networks, spreading counter-narratives about unstable women who fabricate abuse claims. "Marcus's team is responding fast," Carmen observed, watching the organized nature of the negative responses. "This level of coordinated pushback confirms everything we suspected about their resources." Claire's phone rang. Unknown number. "Claire Whitman. This is Diana Martinez from 60 Minutes. I'd like to speak with you about your video." Claire's heart leaped. 60 Minutes was exactly the kind of mainstream credibility they needed to break through the noise. "I'm very interested in speaking with you," Claire replied. "But I should mention that I'm currently in hiding due to credible threats to my safety." "Which makes this an even more compelling story," Diana replied. "Can we arrange a secure meeting? I've been investigating similar cases in the tech industry for 6 months. Your video provides the personal testimony I needed to connect the patterns." As Claire arranged to meet Diana the next day, she watched the video's metrics continue climbing. 2 million views in 6 hours, trending on multiple platforms, major news outlets beginning to pick up the story. But Marcus's counterattack was swift and brutal. By evening, edited security footage appeared on Marcus's social media accounts, showing Claire appearing to have a violent breakdown in his office. The accompanying statement expressed his heartbreak over his wife's tragic mental deterioration and his concern for their unborn child's safety. "He's trying to flip the narrative," Sarah observed, "making you look like the aggressor and himself like the victim." Worse, professional character assassination had begun. Anonymous sources provided details about Claire's troubled past, including fabricated stories about college drinking problems, failed relationships, and financial irresponsibility. The same crisis management playbook that had destroyed Sarah, Maria, and Jennifer was being deployed at the internet speed. "They're good at this," Maria said grimly, watching coordinated attacks spread across social media platforms. "Within hours, they've created enough doubt to muddy the waters." But something unexpected was happening alongside the attacks. Other women began sharing their own vault recordings, their own evidence of systematic abuse by wealthy men. A technology executive in Austin posted security footage of her husband tampering with her car's brakes. A doctor's wife in Boston shared recordings of her husband coordinating with lawyers to have her committed. A senator's wife in Virginia released financial documents proving her husband's charity fraud. "It's becoming a movement," Jennifer realized. "Your video didn't just tell your story. It gave other women permission to tell theirs." The hashtag #TheVault tapes began trending as women shared evidence they had been too frightened to release. Law enforcement agencies found themselves inundated with complaints that had been previously dismissed as domestic disputes. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you've started. Stop now or face consequences beyond your imagination." "A friend." "Threat?" Carmen asked, reading over Claire's shoulder. "Or confirmation that we're hitting the right targets," Claire replied. Her phone rang again. This time it was Detective Rodriguez. "Mrs. Whitman, I need to speak with you immediately. New evidence has come to light that may change the status of your case." "What kind of evidence?" "3 more women have come forward with similar stories about your husband. And the FBI has opened an investigation into the charity fraud allegations. We need your full testimony for federal prosecutors. Claire felt a surge of vindication mixed with terror. They had succeeded in forcing the system to take them seriously, but that also meant Marcus would escalate his efforts to silence them. Detective, I'll cooperate fully, but I need protection. The video has generated serious threats. Already arranged. Federal marshals will escort you to a secure location for debriefing. Mrs. Whitman, I owe you an apology. We should have taken your initial allegations more seriously. As Claire hung up, she realized the validation she had craved felt hollow compared to the magnitude of what they had unleashed. The video had indeed gone viral, but it had also painted a target on every woman brave enough to speak out. Carmen started the car. Time to move. If the feds are involved, Marcus will assume we have federal protection even if we don't yet. As they drove through Los Angeles traffic, Claire's phone continued buzzing with notifications. The story was spreading globally, with international media beginning to investigate similar patterns in other countries. Whatever happens next, Sarah said from the front seat, we've accomplished something important. Women who thought they were alone now know they're part of a larger pattern. Claire placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong movements. I just hope she gets to grow up in a world where this kind of systematic abuse is harder to hide. She will, Jennifer replied with certainty, because we're making sure of it. But as they pulled into the safe house, Claire noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street. It hadn't been there when they left. Carmen, she said quietly, we might have company. Carmen followed Claire's gaze and immediately drove past the safe house without stopping. Time for backup plan B. As they headed toward their secondary location, Claire realized that going viral had indeed forced the system to respond, but it had also escalated the danger beyond anything they had previously faced. The real battle was just beginning. Claire's water broke at 2:47 a.m. in a federal safe house in Pasadena, 3 weeks before her due date and 6 hours before she was scheduled to testify before a federal grand jury. The stress of the previous weeks had finally caught up with her body, triggering labor at the worst possible moment. We need to get to the hospital, Carmen said, helping Claire to the car while federal marshals secured the perimeter. Not just any hospital, Claire gasped between contractions. Marcus has influence at most private facilities in LA. We need somewhere he can't reach. Marshall Williams, the lead agent on her protection detail, was already on his radio. County General has the best security and the least likelihood of compromise, but Mrs. Whitman, your husband has filed emergency custody papers. The moment this baby is born, I know, Claire said through gritted teeth. That's why we need Diana Martinez and her camera crew at the hospital. If Marcus tries to take my daughter, it needs to happen on national television. The drive to LA County General was a surreal combination of medical emergency and federal operation. Claire labored in the back seat while marshals coordinated with hospital security to establish a secure perimeter around the maternity ward. Diana Martinez met them at the emergency entrance with a camera crew from 60 Minutes. Claire, are you sure you want us filming during labor? This is incredibly invasive. It's the only protection I have, Claire replied between contractions. Marcus's power comes from operating in shadows. If everything happens on camera, she was rushed into delivery, and within hours found herself in the surreal situation of giving birth, while federal agents stood guard outside her room and television cameras documented one of the most private moments a woman could experience. Emma Claire Whitman entered the world at 6:23 a.m., weighing 6 pounds 4 ounces, with perfect lungs that announced her arrival to the entire maternity ward. But instead of the joyful moment Claire had imagined, she found herself handcuffed to the hospital bed with a court order preventing her from holding her own daughter. This is temporary, Marshall Williams assured her as medical staff performed Emma's initial assessments. The federal prosecutors are working on emergency motions to override the local custody order. Through the nursery window, Claire could see Emma in an incubator, tiny and perfect, and completely unaware that her first hours of life were being shaped by a legal battle between her parents. The image broke Claire's heart and strengthened her resolve simultaneously. Marcus arrived at the hospital within an hour, accompanied by Rachel and an army of lawyers. He wore his public face perfectly, the concerned father grateful for his daughter's safe arrival despite his wife's ongoing mental health crisis. "I want to see my daughter," he announced to the gathered media, playing his role flawlessly. Claire watched from her hospital bed as Marcus held Emma for the first time. His performance of loving fatherhood so convincing that even Claire might have believed it if she hadn't known the truth. Rachel stood beside him, playing the supportive stepmother-to-be role with practiced ease. But something unexpected happened as the news coverage spread. The image of a newborn baby caught in a custody battle between a billionaire father and a mother handcuffed to a hospital bed sparked outrage that transcended political boundaries. Nurse Maria Santos, who had believed Claire from the beginning, quietly documented everything. She photographed the restraints, recorded Marcus's interactions with Emma, and noted that Claire's vital signs spiked dangerously every time Marcus approached. "This isn't right," she told Diana Martinez on camera. "In 30 years of nursing, I've never seen a new mother treated like a criminal, while the father who threatened her life gets unlimited access to their baby." The 60 Minutes cameras captured Marcus's mask slipping for just a moment when he thought no one was watching. His expression of cold calculation as he held Emma contradicted his public performance of loving concern. Social media exploded with "Wish her Free Emma" and "Save Claire" hashtags. The image of Claire reaching desperately toward the nursery window while handcuffed became a symbol of how the legal system failed to protect vulnerable women and children, but Marcus's legal team was relentless. They filed motion after motion, arguing that Claire's documented mental instability made her a danger to the child. They presented the edited security footage, the manipulated psychiatric evaluations, and character assassinations from concerned friends who feared for Emma's safety. "Your Honor," Claire's attorney argued, "my client has never been convicted of any crime. She's been accused, by her husband, of having a mental breakdown after discovering his affair and financial crimes. The only evidence of her instability comes from sources with clear conflicts of interest." Judge Martinez, randomly assigned to the emergency custody hearing, seemed genuinely troubled by the case. "Mr. Blackstone, the allegations against your client are serious. How do we know that granting him custody serves the child's best interests?" "Your Honor," Marcus's lawyer replied smoothly, "my client has never been charged with any crime." Meanwhile, Mrs. Whitman was found having broken into private property and attempting to destroy business documents. Her own recorded statements show clear paranoid delusions. Those recorded statements also show her accurately predicting events that later occurred. Claire's attorney countered, "If those were delusions, they were remarkably prescient ones." As the legal arguments continued, federal prosecutors presented their evidence of the broader conspiracy. They had documented connections between multiple cases, financial crimes spanning multiple states, and a network of professionals who specialized in destroying women's credibility. "This isn't just a custody dispute," federal prosecutor Rebecca Chen explained to the judge. "This is part of an organized criminal enterprise that systematically eliminates threats to its members' interests." But even as the federal case gained momentum, the immediate custody decision remained with the local court. Marcus's wealth and connections provided him with advantages that legal arguments couldn't overcome. Then Nurse Santos made a decision that changed everything. During Emma's routine examination, she noticed something that made her call Dr. Park immediately. The baby's blood work showed trace amounts of a sedative, nothing dangerous, but enough to make her unusually sleepy and compliant. "This is impossible," Dr. Park said, reviewing the results. "We don't use this medication in our nursery protocols." Nurse Santos checked the security footage and discovered that Rachel had been alone with Emma for 15 minutes while Marcus distracted the nursing staff. During that time, she had administered something from a syringe she claimed was vitamins recommended by the baby's pediatrician. "They were drugging her," Claire realized with horror, "making her docile for the cameras, for the court appearances. They're already abusing her." The evidence of child endangerment shifted the custody battle dramatically. Even judges sympathetic to wealthy defendants couldn't ignore evidence of infant drugging. Emergency custody is hereby transferred to the mother pending full investigation. Judge Martinez ruled, Mr. Whitman's visitation will be supervised and limited until these allegations are resolved. Claire held Emma for the first time as a free woman, skin-to-skin contact that both of them desperately needed. Her daughter's eyes opened, alert and aware now that the sedatives were wearing off. "Hi, baby girl," Claire whispered. "Mommy's here. Mommy's going to keep you safe." But even as she celebrated the legal victory, Claire knew it was temporary. Marcus's resources were vast, and his willingness to harm his own infant daughter proved he would stop at nothing to maintain control. The real battle for Emma's future was just beginning. But for the first time since her escape from the vault, Claire held her daughter and felt hope that justice might actually be possible. The cameras captured it all, a mother's love triumphing over a system designed to silence her, a tiny baby finally safe in her mother's arms, and a billionaire's carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble under the weight of his own actions. 6 months after Emma's birth, Claire sat in the federal courthouse holding her daughter while testifying against Marcus and the network of criminals who had nearly destroyed her life. The baby cooed softly during breaks in testimony, a reminder of everything Claire had fought to protect. Mr. Whitman used his position as CEO of Whitman Technologies to embezzle over $30 million from charitable foundations. Claire testified clearly into the microphone. He maintained detailed records of these crimes in his private vault, along with documentation of other women he had eliminated to protect his interests. Marcus sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his billion-dollar empire reduced to rubble by federal investigations. His charity fraud had been proven conclusively, his offshore accounts seized, his company dissolved. Rachel sat at a separate table, having accepted a plea deal in exchange for her testimony about the conspiracy. "Mrs. Whitman," the prosecutor continued, "can you tell the court about the systematic nature of these crimes?" Claire looked across the courtroom at Sarah, Maria, and Jennifer, who had all testified about their own experiences with the network. Their courage in speaking publicly had inspired dozens of other women to come forward, creating an avalanche of evidence that even Marcus's expensive legal team couldn't overcome. "It was never just about individual cases," Claire explained. "Marcus and his associates had created an entire industry around destroying women who threatened their interests. They shared resources, strategies, and even personnel to ensure that victims would never be believed." Federal investigators had uncovered the full scope of the conspiracy. Titan Digital Security had provided surveillance and evidence manipulation services to over 50 wealthy men across 12 states. The network included corrupt psychiatrists, judges, lawyers, and even media contacts who could shape public narratives. The defendant planned your murder with the same methodical approach he used for business acquisitions. The prosecutor noted, "Can you explain how that felt as a victim?" Claire adjusted Emma in her arms, drawing strength from her daughter's presence. "It felt like being erased while still alive. He didn't just want to kill me. He wanted to destroy the idea that I had ever existed as anything more than a decorative object." Judge Harrison, presiding over the federal RICO case, had shown remarkable patience with the complex testimony and massive evidence files. The case had taken 8 months to prepare and represented the largest prosecution of organized domestic violence in U.S. history. The evidence shows systematic conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, witness intimidation, and racketeering, Judge Harrison stated during closing arguments. These defendants didn't just commit individual crimes. They created an infrastructure for destroying women's lives. Marcus received 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. His conviction opened the floodgates for civil lawsuits from victims and criminal charges in multiple states. The other members of his network received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. Rachel, as the cooperating witness, received 5 years probation and had to surrender custody of her son to his father's family. Her testimony had been crucial in documenting the conspiracy's methods and scope. "I thought I was Marcus's partner," she admitted during her sentencing hearing. "I didn't understand that I was just another victim with a different role to play." The civil settlements were massive. Claire received $47 million from Marcus's seized assets, money she immediately used to establish the Emma Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention and Legal Aid. Sarah, Maria, and Jennifer received settlements that allowed them to rebuild their lives and pursue justice in their own cases. But the most significant victory was cultural rather than financial. The case had sparked a national conversation about power, abuse, and systematic failures in the legal system. Law schools began teaching courses on recognizing organized domestic violence. Police departments implemented new protocols for investigating complaints against wealthy suspects. The Believe Women movement gained momentum as the case demonstrated how elaborate and well-funded efforts to discredit victims could be. 6 months ago, I was homeless and penniless, labeled as mentally unstable by a system that preferred to believe a charming billionaire over an inconvenient woman, Claire said in her law school graduation speech 2 years later. "Today, I'm a practicing attorney dedicated to ensuring no woman faces that battle alone." Claire had completed her law degree in record time, studying while raising Emma and managing the foundation. Her daughter, now a bright and healthy toddler, sat in the front row during the graduation ceremony, surrounded by their chosen family of fellow survivors and allies. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Claire's therapist, had become a close friend and advocate. Their therapeutic relationship had evolved into a partnership focused on helping other trauma survivors reclaim their narratives and rebuild their lives. "Healing isn't about forgetting what happened," Dr. Chen often reminded Claire. "It's about integrating those experiences into a life of purpose and meaning." Carmen Rodriguez, the shelter director who had first believed Claire's story, received a federal grant to expand her programs nationwide. The network of safe houses and legal advocates they had built together now served hundreds of women escaping similar situations. Emma's first birthday party was held at the foundation headquarters, surrounded by the women who had helped save her life. She crawled between her chosen aunties, Sarah, Maria, Jennifer, Carmen, Dr. Chen, and Nurse Santos, all of whom had played crucial roles in her mother's survival and recovery. "She'll grow up knowing that women who support each other can overcome any challenge," Claire told Diana Martinez during a follow-up interview for 60 Minutes. "She'll never doubt that her voice matters or that her experiences are valid." Claire had begun dating David Chen, Dr. Chen's brother and a widowed single father, but slowly and carefully. She had learned to trust her instincts about people and refused to rush into any relationship that might compromise her hard-won independence. "I'm not looking for someone to complete me," she explained to Sarah during one of their regular coffee meetings. "I'm looking for someone who complements the complete person I've already become." The Emma Foundation had grown beyond domestic violence advocacy to include programs for financial literacy, legal education, and technology security. Claire wanted to address all the vulnerabilities that predatory men exploited when targeting women. "We're not just helping individual victims," she explained to potential donors. "We're changing the systems that create victims in the first place." Marcus's conviction had also led to corporate reforms at technology companies. The SEC implemented new oversight requirements for charity foundations connected to major corporations. Several states passed laws requiring mandatory reporting of domestic violence allegations against wealthy defendants. But perhaps the most meaningful victory was personal. Claire had reclaimed her identity as an engineer, an advocate, a mother, and a survivor. She was no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by what she had chosen to do in response. The woman who walked into that vault was naive and trusting, Claire reflected during a foundation fundraiser. The woman who walked out was tested by fire and determined to ensure no other woman faces that ordeal alone. Emma took her first steps on the anniversary of Claire's escape from the vault, walking confidently across the foundation's office toward her mother's outstretched arms. It felt symbolic, both of them moving forward, both of them strong, both of them surrounded by people who loved and supported them. Claire's story had become part of the cultural conversation about justice, but more importantly, it had become a roadmap for other women facing similar battles. The vault that had nearly been her tomb had instead become the catalyst for a movement that would protect countless others. As she held Emma and watched the sunset through their apartment windows, Claire felt something she hadn't experienced since before meeting Marcus, complete peace with her life and confidence in her future. The nightmare was over. The real life could finally begin. 3 years had passed since Marcus's conviction when Claire received the letter that would launch her into her next battle. She was reviewing foundation cases in her Century City law office when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's a woman here who insists on seeing you personally," Maria said. "She won't give her full name, but she said to tell you that her husband makes Marcus look like an amateur." Claire looked up from her desk where she had been reviewing applications for the Foundation's new technology security program. At 31 years old, she had built the Emma Foundation into a national organization with offices in 12 cities. Emma, now a curious and confident 3-year-old, spent mornings in the office daycare before going to preschool. "Send her in," Claire said, closing the files and giving her full attention to what was clearly going to be another complicated case. The woman who entered looked familiar in the way that all abuse victims looked familiar to Claire now. The careful posture, the nervous glances, the way she held herself as if expecting attack from any direction. She was Asian American, probably mid-30s, with the kind of understated elegance that suggested wealth and education. "Ms. Whitman, my name is Dr. Sarah Chen," the woman said, then quickly added, "No relation to your Dr. Chen. I'm a NASA engineer, and I need your help with something that's going to sound impossible." Claire gestured to the comfortable chairs away from her formal desk. "Dr. Chen, nothing sounds impossible to me anymore. What's happening?" Sarah Chen took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. "My husband is Dr. James Liu, CEO of NextGen Technologies. He's been systematically torturing me through our smart home system for the past 2 years, and he's gotten so sophisticated that he can make me appear mentally unstable to anyone who investigates." She showed Claire video footage from her home security system, lights flickering on and off, doors opening and closing by themselves, the thermostat changing temperatures randomly, and her own voice apparently talking to herself in empty rooms. "It started small," Sarah continued. "Little things I could dismiss as technical glitches, but it escalated. Now he can make it appear that I'm having conversations with people who aren't there, that I'm destroying property, that I'm a danger to myself and others." Claire studied the footage with the same analytical mind she had brought to her own case years earlier. This is incredibly sophisticated gaslighting. He's using technology to make you doubt your own perceptions while creating evidence of your supposed instability. Exactly. And because he's a respected tech CEO with government contracts, nobody believes that he would do something so elaborate just to abuse his wife. They assume I'm having paranoid delusions about technology I don't understand. "But you're a NASA engineer," Claire pointed out. "You understand technology better than most people." Sarah's smile was bitter. "That's what makes it so perfect. He can claim that my technical knowledge is part of my delusion, that I think I understand systems well enough to believe they're being manipulated when they're really just malfunctioning." Claire recognized the sophistication of the gaslighting technique. It was several generations beyond what Marcus had attempted, using the victim's own expertise against her rather than simply dismissing her intelligence. "What triggered this escalation? Did you discover something about his business practices?" "Government contracts," Sarah replied. "James has been selling surveillance technology to foreign governments, including some with horrible human rights records. When I found the communications, he realized I was a threat to his operation." Claire felt the familiar anger rising. Another brilliant woman being systematically destroyed by a man who viewed her as disposable. "Have you tried leaving?" "I tried once. He had me committed for a 72-hour psychiatric hold, claiming I had threatened to hurt myself and others. The evidence he provided was fabricated using the smart home system, but it was convincing enough to medical professionals who don't understand the technology." "Do you have children?" Sarah shook her head. "James insisted we wait until his business was more established. Now I understand why. Children would complicate his ability to eliminate me when I became inconvenient. Claire pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. Dr. Chen, what you're describing is technological domestic violence on a scale we haven't encountered before. If James is sharing these techniques with other abusers, that's what I'm afraid of, Sarah interrupted. I think he's been testing and refining these methods on me before marketing them to other wealthy men who want to control or eliminate their wives. The implications were staggering. If the technology existed to make anyone appear mentally unstable through manipulation of their living environment, the potential for abuse was limitless. I need to ask you something difficult, Claire said carefully. Are you prepared for the possibility that fighting back could put your life in immediate danger? James sounds like he's even more calculating than Marcus was. I'm already in immediate danger, Sarah replied. Last week, he made my car's GPS system malfunction while I was driving on the freeway. I nearly crashed into a concrete barrier. He's not planning to discredit me forever. He's planning to kill me and make it look like an accident or suicide. Claire thought about Emma, playing safely in the daycare down the hall, surrounded by security that ensured no one could use her as leverage against her mother. Taking on this case would mean putting her own family at risk again, but it would also mean protecting countless other women from a new generation of technological abuse. Dr. Chen, I want to help you, but I need you to understand that fighting someone with James's resources and technical capabilities will require federal intervention from the beginning. This isn't something we can handle with local law enforcement. I was hoping you'd say that, Sarah replied, pulling out a tablet, because I've been documenting everything, and I think I've found evidence that connects James to several suspicious deaths of women married to tech executives. The tablet showed a timeline of incidents: car accidents with malfunctioning safety systems, house fires with disabled smoke detectors, medical emergencies in homes where monitoring systems had mysteriously failed. These women all discovered their husbands' illegal activities, Sarah continued, and they all died in ways that could be explained by technology failures, but looked suspicious when viewed as a pattern. Claire studied the data with growing alarm. If Sarah was right, they weren't just dealing with one abusive husband. They were looking at a new evolution of the conspiracy that had nearly killed her. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. I think James has been communicating with Marcus in prison. I found encrypted messages that reference the vault situation and improved methods for dealing with difficult wives. Claire's blood ran cold. Marcus was supposed to be isolated in federal prison, unable to continue his criminal activities. If he was somehow coordinating with other abusers, Dr. Chen, I'm going to help you, but we're going to need a completely different approach than we used with Marcus. If James has been learning from Marcus's mistakes and improving on his methods, then we need to be smarter than both of them, Sarah finished. Claire looked out her office window at the Los Angeles skyline, thinking about all the brilliant women in those buildings who might be facing similar technological abuse without realizing it. Emma's future depended on stopping these predators before their methods became widespread. The first thing we need to do is get you somewhere safe, Claire said, but not a traditional safe house. If James can manipulate technology remotely, we need a location that's completely disconnected from smart systems. I've been staying in a cabin in the mountains that my grandmother left me, Sarah replied. No internet, no smart devices, just basic utilities. It's the only place I feel like myself anymore. Claire made a note to have Carmen's team sweep the cabin for any hidden surveillance devices. The second thing we need is a federal cybercrime task force. This is beyond the scope of traditional domestic violence. We're dealing with criminal use of emerging technology. As they began planning their strategy, Claire's computer screen flickered momentarily. Then it returned to normal, but a new document had appeared on her desktop, a document she hadn't created. The file was titled "The Game Continues" and contained a single line of text. Thought you might want to know that some old friends are eager to continue our conversation. Emily. Claire's office security system chimed, indicating that someone had accessed her computer remotely, but that should have been impossible with their cybersecurity protocols. Dr. Chen, Claire said carefully, I think your husband isn't the only one who's been upgrading his technical capabilities. Sarah looked at the screen and her face went pale. That's not James's work. The coding structure is different. Someone else is helping him. Claire immediately called her security team while mentally cataloging everything that needed to be moved or secured. If Marcus was somehow orchestrating a new wave of attacks from prison, using James's technology to target women who had previously escaped. Emma, Claire said suddenly, reaching for her phone to call the daycare. She's fine, came a voice from the office speaker system. We're not interested in children, just their mothers who won't learn their place. The voice was electronically distorted, but Claire recognized the cold intelligence behind it. Marcus had found new allies, new methods, and new targets. The battle Claire thought she had won was apparently just the opening move in a much larger game. As she and Sarah Chen looked at each other across the office, both women realized they were facing an enemy that had learned from defeat and evolved beyond their previous understanding. The vault had been primitive compared to what was coming next, but Claire was no longer the naive woman who had trusted her husband's lies. She was a battle-tested advocate with resources, allies, and a 3-year-old daughter who deserved to grow up in a world where brilliant women didn't have to fear for their lives. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and this time, Claire would be ready from the first move. Dr. Chen, she said with grim determination, I think we're going to need a bigger team. Outside her office windows, the city lights began flickering in a pattern that seemed almost like Morse code, as if the entire urban infrastructure was being turned into a weapon against women who dared to fight back. The future of domestic violence was technological, systematic, and more dangerous than anything Claire had previously imagined. But the future of resistance would be equally innovative, equally systematic, and absolutely determined to win. The game was far from over.